But okay, here we are. And
Yeah.
I'm here to have a conversation with Dean Hall, who I've only just learned about a week ago. And um, in just this past week, my life has already been changed just by seeing what you're putting out there and then reading your book, which I'll hold up.
Wow, Tammy, thank you so much. That's such high praise. What an honor.
Thank
Yeah.
thank you for being here. I think I mostly connected because I resonate so much with your story, having used deliberate cold exposure as a way to cure, or a way to I hate the word cure, but um, recover
That's what it did.
from disease and
Uh,
dysfunction.
but it's really important. And the one time I did get to talk to Wim Hof, I told him I should be his poster boy because it was totally unexpected. The only reason, I mean, this was, you got to understand, I started cold plunging and have done so almost every day, unless I'm stuck in, some urban area that, especially 10 years ago, there weren't cold plunge places. But every day since January 4th of 2014. And the only reason I started was I had two forms of cancer. And rather than just spend the rest of my time on earth fighting cancer, I decided to swap and trade fighting cancer for loving life, whatever that meant. It didn't mean I was going to stop doing, what I needed to do to live. But the problem I saw in myself, and I'd seen in so many cancer patients that I'd treated as clients, is that they do what I call chase the cure. And they spend the rest of their life running around thinking this or that, or this, or a combination of that strategy and this medicine is going to heal them. And it just escalates their fear cycle. And so I thought, okay, if I've got not long to live, I want to leave my daughter with a legacy of courage and hope, and I want to do something that means something with the last part of my life. And so, for 30 years, I had the dream of becoming the first person in history to swim the entire length of the longest river here in my home state of Oregon. And I found out no one had still done it. And so I thought, even if I die trying, it leaves my daughter with something. It's much better than her watching me die on the couch watching Wheel of Fortune.
Mhm.
And it's a lot better way to go as far as I was concerned. Plus, my hope was that by doing this, it would get enough press to inspire other cancer patients to refuse to be defined by their diagnosis. And so, January 4th, 2014, I realized, I'm a pretty sick guy and I'm getting in better shape, but the Willamette is largely a snowmelt river. It comes out of the Cascades, the mountain range, and then it runs through our two biggest college towns, Eugene and Corvallis. Then it goes through our state capital. Then it feeds the Willamette Valley, which historically has just been beautiful farmland. It's why people settled here. Now it's world class vineyards and wineries. And then it goes through our largest town, Portland, and then dumps into the Columbia River. And I was only born 4 blocks from it.
Wow.
So it just felt right. But it was not in my wildest expectation that this thing would heal me. I'd never heard of cold water immersion. There was no research that I knew of, or my oncologist knew of at the time. And he was sure it was going to kill me, and that I would be really, if I was able to accomplish it, I'd need immediate chemo and radiation.
Yeah.
And so that's what we had planned.
So Dean, what For what temp was the water at? Was it, did I read 40 degrees?
Yeah, it was 42 to 45 degrees. My first practice swim in April was, because
That
I
was impactful. I read
realized I
that.
realized that man, if I'm going to swim this river, I better start getting in it and practicing and seeing how it's different to swim in a river than a pool. And I swum across rivers and lakes before. I'd done a lot of triathlons in the 80s and 90s, but I'd never been on a swim team. And it's important for people to understand I'd never won a swim race in my life. I'm a pretty good swimmer. I'd always come out about in the top 10 to 15, but I'd never come out first. And so I thought, well, I better start swimming rivers, and this one in particular. And it's funny now; it wasn't at the time, but in order for the World Association of Open Water Swimming to verify it as a legitimate swim, I couldn't wear a wetsuit.
Hmm.
And so I got in at 39 degrees, and I'm pretty tough mentally. I always have been. I was raised by two mountain climbers. I climbed the tallest mountain in Oregon. It was a family tradition handed down by my dad's family. He did it. He wanted us boys to do it at 9 years old, climb Mount Hood. And it's a long climb. And, so I just learned to crawl into the back of my head and watch my body do things. And so I thought, I'm mentally tough enough. I can handle the cold. So I get into this water, and it is so freezing that after about 20 minutes, I noticed as I'd come up that my arms were purple, and then I started doing what's called hypothermic aspirating. I'd kind of heard of it, I'd never experienced it. It's where you get so cold that your body starts to seize up and spasm, and it just squeezes you so tightly that it pushes all your air out. It's almost like you're vomiting air. It was terrifying. And so we got out. My cousin was there in that first swim, and I rolled into his canoe, and he said, "Oh man, you look like Papa Smurf." And I looked down, and I literally was blue. And so I had to run in place for about 30 minutes before I started warming up. And then I was extremely cold the rest of the day. But that's when we decided I better wear a wetsuit. Who cares if, the world, a bunch of little old men in London sign off on it or not? That's
Exactly.
not why I was doing it.
No.
Yeah.
I am. It was interesting when I reached out to you to speak. I thought our conversation was going to be about deliberate cold exposure, and it is to some
Yeah, it
degree.
is.
And
Right.
then I read your book, and I was like, oh man, there's so much more here. And you talk about purpose and power on page 15. You talk about slipping back into your identity, uh,
Right.
and um, to me, it's like getting in alignment with your life's blueprint. And so I know that the cold absolutely impacts the physiology and gives the body the push it needs to heal. But how much do you think that other like that alignment with, being who you were meant to be also impacted that?
Oh, I think it was primary.
Hmm.
I think that was even more important for me, and I've seen for most of my clients since, than even the cold water. I believe the cold water is just one of the most fantastic things a person can do, especially in our modern culture. Our modern culture has become so far away from how we humans were designed to live that we're just way too comfortable, way too sedentary. And I've coined a term about 6 months ago, synthetic living syndrome. And I've developed a little test for it in a new book I'm handing out, or I guess I'm not handing out. I guess I'm selling it. But the cold, forcing yourself to do something that's uncomfortable but helpful is really key. But having a passionate purpose, I've come to believe, based on what I experienced and then what I've seen hundreds of my clients since experience, that all of us come into this world with a dream. And it's like an instinct in us, like a goose to fly south for the winter. And Tammy's dream isn't Dean's dream. And most of the time, our dreams don't make sense uh, to anyone else, but it just lights you up and energizes you anytime you think about it.
Mm,
And that's exactly what happened to me. As a matter of fact, when I remembered the dream and the boy I had been, you see, growing up the son of two mountain climbers, and they weren't professional mountain climbers by any means, but we spent every weekend out hiking and climbing, and it was just the best childhood for a kid like me. And all I wanted to do was be a National Geographic sponsored explorer. That's all I wanted to do as a kid. People would say, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'd say, "Well, I want to be an explorer." And they're like, "That's not a job." And I'm like, "I know." And they're like, "Well, you can't get paid for that." I'm like, "No, no, you can," because some of my parents' friends had been that. They'd climbed Everest back in the '60s when people didn't do that, and so I knew it was possible. But then as I got older, I just got it kind of carved out of me. I heard so many times that's not sustainable that I thought, well, I better be responsible and do something else. And so I kind of traded my dream for responsibility, or what I thought responsibility was.
I
But
can relate.
once I got it back, just this, every time I'd think about it, this shot of electricity would go through me. And I've seen that sort of experience. There's almost always a tangible physical experience with that for most folks, either an electric shock like mine, or just this kind of warm glow, or this feeling of peace and happiness.
Mm,
There's something that helps your body remembers, and it recognizes truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does. I strongly believe in that and can resonate with your story. Also, having traded passion for responsibility.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a financial advisor, and so I tell people that when I retired when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I tell
Hmm.
people that leaving that industry was like remembering, the connection to the soul and then diving into passion, of course. Um, in the book you talk about, I see intersperses of references to visualization, meditation, mindfulness, and mantras. And I'm just curious, like, did you have mentors in that arena, or was this something, those things you just found for yourself, or
Yeah. Well, my first degree is in religion and philosophy.
okay. All right, there
and,
you go.
and then, much to my surprise, in 1983, nobody wanted to hire a 23-year-old philosopher.
Go
So
figure.
I thought, well, I better get another degree. And so I did. I got a teaching degree, and was an art teacher for 20 years. Just absolutely loved it. Probably would have still been doing it if I hadn't felt like I was voluntarily assigning my family to poverty. So after about 5 years of that, and seeing that in the school district that I was in 20 years, I'd only be making about $5,000 more than I was making then. And
Mm,
I thought, oh, this is not exactly a growth industry. And so that's when I went back and put myself through graduate school to become a therapist. And early on, I became a therapist in 1990, about 100 years ago. And within the first 5 years, I realized talk therapy just didn't do it. And I knew I wanted to develop a private practice. And the statistics in the 90s were only 30% of those who went to therapy reported that it was beneficial. And
Hmm.
I thought, man, living in this small town that I was living in the Midwest, because I went out to Kansas, of all places, to play soccer and fell in love with a cute little Kansas farm girl and put myself in exile for love. So I was living in her small rural town 4 miles from the Oklahoma border of only 12,000. And I thought, uh, if 7 out of 10 leave my office not having gotten any beneficial help, then I'm not going to be very successful. So I started scrambling. Mindfulness hadn't become a thing yet. And so I started developing my own sort of blend of therapy with the things that I knew helped me. And I'd been meditating already by that time for about 5 years every day. And then all of a sudden, in the late 90s, I started reading about dialectical behavioral therapy and mindfulness. And in 2000, I became a certified clinical hypnotherapist. And so I really learned somatic therapy before somatic therapy was a thing.
Hmm.
And so my experience and my training as a therapist really kind of guided me there.
Wow, that's beautiful. The folks that you
Yeah.
work with are really blessed, I'm sure, with, having all of those tools at your disposal because those are such powerful tools.
Well, I hope so. I think now what I've learned from my lived experience, and we'll probably talk about that, it's changed everything I used to think as a therapist. As a matter of fact, and this sounds so pretentious, so forgive me, I feel like I ought to cross myself and I'm not Catholic to even say these words, but in the last year and a half or two, I've even developed a new approach to traditional therapy I'm calling bio-wild psychology. And we could talk about that if you want to, but it's a very earth and nature connected approach, and
Mm,
how if we don't have that, then we really can't be happy, healthy humans.
that is so, say the name again of it. It is,
Bio wild psychology, because
wow.
I believe our biology is attuned to nature or the wild places on earth, and we have our own wild self. As a matter of fact, the book I'm coming out with, well, it's being published here this week, is a journal called the Wild Me Manual. And I'm just basically taking people through very easy steps that I used to recover from cancer and stay happy and healthy. And I can honestly say I'm happier and I'm healthier than I've ever been in my life. And I just turned 65, so I'm officially old. And all of my friends are having a hard time now getting off the couch, or they're making old man sounds all the time, and they've
Mhm.
got all these aches and pains. And
Here you
I've
are.
got I've got less than 10% body fat and swimming a couple miles a day and feeling fantastic. So
Amazing.
yeah.
You talk a little bit about your parents. You've mentioned them since we've been talking, and
Mhm.
I think I read in there that your dad had cancer 3 times.
Yeah, he really struggled. He had prostate cancer first, and I watched part of the decision making. What influenced my decision making so much is I'd had so many clients in this tiny little town in Kansas get cancer. I think it was just a hotbed because, and it was almost always those people that had grown up there,
Mm.
which later included my wife as well. because they used so much DDT in the 60s and 70s. And then we had an oil refinery real close that had not been very careful with their emissions, and I think had polluted the water table as well.
Mm.
And so, for our tiny little town of 12,000, when I left it, 15 people had Parkinson's, and there were only 12,000. I mean, and that was just the people I knew. And then in the last 2 years, 18 people had died of brain tumors, my wife being one of them. And
Wow.
then there were 25 of us that had leukemia of some sort.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so it was just a hotbed of cancer. And so I'd watched a lot of them go through treatment. And just even if the treatment was successful, and so many times it wasn't, uh, it was it was regrettable how they didn't add. When you get told you have cancer, it's terrifying. But then people are so afraid, they just kind of go brain
Whatever.
dead
Yep. You just tell me what
and
to do and
do
I'll do it.
whatever. Yeah. And the doctors only have one plan, and they don't advocate for themselves or think through. And what I'd seen both with my dad and then with all these clients is, even if the treatment's successful, they have lifelong side effects like neuropathy and hardening of the arteries and complications with their organs and brain fog and all sorts of things. Yeah, and
So,
I really didn't. I would have done it if I had to. I was spared, but boy, I didn't want to.
so how, like, I'm curious around this because I went through this with my family. I'm curious
Mhm.
around how much convincing it took for them to believe in what you were doing, your family and
Oh,
around you.
they still don't. Yeah, I they thought I was nuts. And my mom, on more than one occasion, either cried and told me, please do whatever the doctor says, you're going to die. And I said, Mom, I fundamentally don't believe that. I believe whatever the body creates, the body can heal. And she's like, that's not science. And I'm like, we're reading different science, I think. And I pointed her to it, but just because I wasn't wearing a white lab coat, I was stupid. Um, and uh, my dad, I had a recent experience with him that was just horrifying. I mean, he was on the river with me the entire time.
Yeah.
He saw the changes in me. He saw the before and the after. He was there when the oncologist, or at least a phone call away, when the oncologist told me that I was cancer free. Spoiler alert. And yet a year ago, he's had a lot of skin cancer, and so he was talking to me about it. And a radiology tech, who I found out later was 20 years old, had never been to school, was just flipping a button and wearing a white lab coat, told him I'd finally gotten him to start cold plunging,
Hmm.
and it was really helping. He's 91, so it was really helping his arthritis, and it was clearing up his brain fog. It was helping his mood because he was getting massive dumps of serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. It
Hmm.
was really helping him, and he was only doing it at 58 degrees, so it wasn't a huge zap, but he was staying in for 15 or 20 minutes. It was what he could handle. But this little kid told him, oh, well, you probably better stop your cold plunging, while we do this radiation, because it's going to compromise your body. And so he's like, and I said, well, why would you say that? And this kid looked him dead in the eye and said, "Well, there's no science or any proof that that works. That's just a bunch of baloney on social media." And because he was wearing a lab coat, Dad quit. And he's like, "Well, Dean, there's no proof." And I looked at him. I said,
The
I
proof.
said,
What
I,
more
I,
proof do you
I
need?
rarely, I was raised in that time where you don't talk back, you know, and so I've rarely done it. But I looked at him and I says, "I can't believe," and not very nicely. I says, "I can't believe after all we've been through and all you've seen and you've witnessed firsthand that you would say that." And so I started asking him, I said, "Was this the radiologist?" "No." "How old was this guy?" "Oh, he told me he just turned 20. "Oh, so he's graduated from high school and he's flipping a button. And you're going to throw out everything you've seen firsthand, even how much it's helped you, because some little kid in a white lab coat." I said, "That's crazy."
So much fear. There's so
Yeah.
much fear. And
And so much we've been brainwashed. If somebody in a lab coat tells us something, we just go brain dead and do whatever they tell us to.
I remember the day that I went in to see the oncologist for the first time. And this oncologist had also treated my mom, my dad, and
Oh,
sister. So all four family members.
right.
And the first thing he said to me was, when is your first, let's book your first chemo. And I was like, whoa, wait a sec, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. And I remember telling my family I wasn't going to do that, and there was, a lot of pushback. And then a year later, when I didn't do the chemo and I was in his office just doing my 1 year sign off, he's like, "Aren't you glad you didn't do chemo?" And I was like, "You think?" And I will tell you,
Wow.
I did everything they told me not to do.
Did you
Deliver
really?
cold exposure, the salt rooms. They're like, "Don't do salt rooms. It's not gonna." And I was like, "I'm doing the salt room."
Wow.
Everything that
Yeah,
they
you
said
were
to
you
me.
were tougher than I was. I would go in almost apologetically and I'd say, "Doctor, I know you know a lot more about this. You've studied it. Please don't hear me being disrespectful. But I want you to know my approach to this is I'm the boss of my body. I will use you as an expert consultant, but I'm not going to just blindly do everything you tell me to do." And the first oncologist threw down his clipboard and slammed the door. I'm like, and the nurse, the nurse came in and said, "What happened?" And I told her what I'd said, and she's like, "Yeah, that's not going to fly with him." I said, "Well, could you refer me to somebody else?" And so she did. And the next guy, he said, "Oh, you'll love him. He's really nice." And he was. And he sat there and he wrote everything down. He's taking notes, looking at me. And then as soon as he's done, he quietly put it down. He's like, "That's not the way I work. If you're going to work with me, you got to do everything I said, or I can't work with you ethically." And I'm like, "Ethically?" I said, "Ethically, am I not the boss of my body? Can't you respect that?" And he's like, "Well, I see your point, but no." I'm like, "Okay, refer me." And so I kept being
Going down the
referred until I
line.
until I finally just flew down to University of California, San Diego. My dad had found the world's number 3 researcher in leukemia, and he was just a wonderful, kind, brilliant man. And he'd always kind of shake his head, but he said, "Dean, this is your life, and I'm going to respect that."
Hmm.
And I just encourage everybody to go through the referrals until they find someone that will work with them.
And listen to your truth, right?
Right,
So that we're actually being heard. I
right,
I knew in my body that chemo was not the right choice for me. It wasn't
really.
it wasn't a fear-based decision.
Mm,
It was a powerful take ownership of my body decision. And
mm.
yeah, I love that. I love that you went,
Yeah, that's deeply intuitive.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
beautiful. Hmm.
thank you. I have a question around when you feel like the healing began.
Hmm.
the minute that you decided to swim the river, was it when you started practicing for the swim in the pool, or was it like on the journey of doing the actual swim?
I think healing began when it was August 13th, 2013. I was down to 152 pounds. Uh, and I'm 6'1" and a half. Right now, you can't really see me, but I'm 212. And so I was just skin and bones, literally. The only thing on me that was robust was my lymphoma had gotten so bad that underneath each jaw bone, the lymph nodes had swollen past my jaw. And then I had what my oncologist lovingly called my hockey puck under my right arm. Those are the biggest. You could see my clavicle. You could see the bones in my chest, and I'm like, how did that happen? You could see every rib. You could see my pelvic bones. It was just, and I've never considered myself a pretty boy, but I was ugly with a capital Ugh. And I made a practice for the last 2 years to never look in the mirror because I was already so sad, and when I'd look in the mirror, I wouldn't recognize myself. It was always like, oh, geez. And so I just decided it was easier not to. Well, this morning when I had walked in, I'd flipped on the light and I had accidentally looked up and I caught myself in the mirror and I hadn't looked for, gosh, maybe a year or so. And it shocked me. Number one, that guy looked so sad and he had these deep red rimmed eyes and kind of sunken, and he just I blurted out, ah. I said some words. You look like you just stepped out of Auschwitz. And I did. I look like those skeletal guys that you see in the documentary. And I helped a lot of people come back to life using Viktor Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning. And so immediately I whispered an apology to Viktor because he had come out of Auschwitz. And that's when I decided, if I let this thing happen, that would be fine with me, but that would make my daughter a 21-year-old orphan. And I adore her and she is adorable. And so I decided that's not fair. And that decision is when I think I started healing.
Hmm.
Um,
I love that. Here's what comes up for me when you say that. When you talk, and this came up for me a little bit in the book as well. Your
mhm,
daughter's name is Bree, and she co-wrote
right.
the book with you, which I love.
Hmm.
Um, so you didn't want to leave her an orphan, and you had such a drive to do this swim, which some people would say could have killed you, right?
Most
It
did.
was,
Even my adventurer parents, when I told them, I thought they'd pat me on the back and say, "Oh yeah, that's great." And my dad's like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And my mom just sat on the couch crying and repeating over and over, "Why? Why won't you do what the doctors say?"
Mhm. Right?
And
And
I almost gave up then because, who wants to make their mom cry? Yeah.
there was something intuitively within you that knew that doing this, you would still be here for Bree. There had to be like something inside of you that was like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I didn't expect a good outcome, really. I was hopeful, but I just knew whenever I even thought about it, it gave me back a piece of me.
Hmm.
And she'd already lost so much, and even so much of me. She'd seen me
Yeah,
wither,
yeah,
and she was terrified. And I thought, if my daughter watches me swim 187 miles, she'll know that I'm probably going to live.
hmm.
So I was kind of trying to do it to give her hope more than just keep me alive.
Got you. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Mama River Whisperer. So I'm reading the book and I see these quotes from the River Whisperer, and I'm circling ones that like I end up circling half of them because they all resonate with me on some level. And I'm like, who is this? Who is this? And then I find a spot in the book where you talk about renaming the river to Mama River. And are they just channeled messages? Not just. Are they channeled messages?
Yeah. And it's hard for me to admit based on how I was raised and then with my clinical training, but I developed organically and authentically a very deep relationship with that river that again was totally unexpected. When I got in January or June 3rd of 2014, it was a river. It was a beautiful natural uh, thing, a piece of nature. I kind of saw it like a big blue highway to get me down to the Columbia River. I was very separate from it
Hmm.
and um, didn't, I thought of it as a thing. I didn't think of having a relationship with it, other than I knew I'd be in it a lot. I sometimes in preparation even looked at it as an adversary. Like I'm not gonna let you beat me. I'm gonna I'm gonna show you kind of thing. I think that's how subtly and insidiously we are taught in our culture to separate ourselves from nature. And then being raised in the kind of Christianity I was, you're always taught that you are the caretaker, the steward, you are higher in creation in this weird pyramid that I no longer ascribe to at all. But after about a couple days, I was swimming 10 to 12 hours a day, and I was feeling the flow, and I was kind of dancing with it and and working with it. We weren't obviously opponents, and I started feeling it
Hmm.
first in my body, um, and so I started calling it Big Blue.
I remember you saying feeling the energy of the river, and I was like, oh man,
Yeah,
reading those words feel good. So you started calling it Big Blue.
yeah. And then on day 6, I had one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life, probably ever will. It 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 was the punctuation point in my life. Didn't know it at the time. It was just kind of wild. We were swimming out of Albany, and we'd gone about 60, 70 miles by then, a little more. And we came along this long straight, the Willamette at first is just a real windy, real fast, kind of terrifying river in a lot of ways. Not a lot of rapids, but man, that baby's moving, and a
Hmm.
lot of switchbacks, and had some scary moments. But because I don't know if your people or even that if the current's going even a mile an hour, if you get pushed up against something, it creates 2,000 pounds of pressure. You're not
Wow.
getting off of that. And so, and in that, there are a lot of big trees in Oregon and a lot of log jam. We came up to a lot of log, not quite jams, but clusters and mounds and switchbacks where if I would have gotten pushed up against it or in it, I'd have been a goner. And that's probably why still to this day, nobody except for me swum the whole thing. But we came on this long straight passage that was framed by these 100-foot Douglas fir trees. And as we were coming along, my dad was my guide boater, which was a whole nother beautiful gift.
Amazing. So
Yeah,
amazing.
and that was totally unexpected. I tell everybody, the process of following your dream, it starts out kind of with some fanfare, but then very quickly you go into what I call the desert of big dreams, where nobody cares. and you wonder why you're doing it, and nothing seems to go right. But then if you just persist and continue to have the courage to follow it, life starts handing you these miraculous gifts. And
Mm.
one of them was my dad being my guide boater. At the time, he was 79. He was a cancer survivor. And, what 79-year-old man's going to kayak for 187 miles? But he did. And we realized we'd done a lot of mountain climbs and some multi-day backpacks together, but we'd never been together 22 days, 24/7 our whole lives.
Mhm.
And it really gave us a chance to kind of work out some stuff and then also get really close and understand each other. And it was just a gift. And now that he's 91 and starting to really fail, and it's hard to see, it was a gift to him as well.
Mm.
He still talks about it just about every time we're together. How
That-
glad he was that he wasn't able to talk me out of it. So,
mm.
but anyway, back to this beautiful day.
But Dean,
Uh,
that was the one side, that was the biggest surprise of the book when I read that your dad was going to join you on the journey. And I was like, wow, like how there could be a whole book based on just on that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And
it
just
was the
seeing how it
biggest
touched your
surprise
emotions.
for me too. We had six guide boaters planned, all of them really fairly expert guide boaters and kayakers. And 2 months before the swim, within a 3 day period, four out of the six bailed. And by this time, my dad was helping me start to plan out the swim because he'd done many multi day backpacks. And then we've got something out here called Hood to Coast. It's a long relay race that goes all the way from Mount Hood to the coast, and it's become world famous. And he helped the organizer plan that out. And so he's good at that kind of thing. And so I recruited him, and he was helping me look at where each day I should get in and where I should get out, how to plan this thing. And he was very instrumental, very helpful. He was really all in at that point. And so I went to him and I said, Dad, what am I going to do? Four out of the six have dropped. He's like, oh, that's too bad. We'll just find somebody else. And then the next day he calls me up and he's like, I know what we're going to do. And I said, good. He's like, I'm going to do it. I'm like, well, good. We'll still need three more. And he's like, no, you're not listening. I said, what? And he's like, I'm going to do it. I'm like, but Dad, you're 79. No problem. He's like, I was like, but Dad, you've never been in a kayak. I'll learn. And so he did. We got a couple expert guide boaters to do several practice swims with us, and they taught him how to kayak. And so he did it with me. Well, anyway, so we're on this day. We're going on this long straight portion, beautiful with these lined with these Douglas fir trees, and he stopped me and he's like, "Hey, look at this!" And so I stopped, and there were two
Eagles, yes.
big eagles, a male, female, and as soon as I had passed them, they had been roosting there together, and he had seen them, but he didn't think it was worth stopping me. But when I passed, they were circling me, and he says, "You probably look like a good meal to them, and as bad as you stink, they probably think you're half dead." And so we laughed, and I enjoyed just drifting and watching these eagles circle me, and didn't think much of it. But as I swam, they stayed with me. And
Mm.
then about every 30 minutes, I'd get so hypothermic, I'd have to stop and get out and warm up. And when I'd stop, they'd roost. And
Mm.
then when I'd start, they'd circle me. And this went on for about 3.5 hours. Every time I'd stop, they'd stop. Every time I'd go, they'd circle me. And then even after I was done, we ended up in Corvallis, And by then we were starting to get a little bit of attention because we'd almost gone 100 miles. And so, the news people thought, oh, this guy isn't just crazy. Maybe he's going to be successful. And so there was a news team there waiting for me to interview me, and they circled us the entire time. And even the cameraman shot it, and the newscaster said, wow, that's beautiful. I've never seen them do that before. And I said, and I don't know that she believed me. Yeah, they've been circling me for the last 3.5 hours. And she's like, oh, really? No, that's crazy. And I said, yeah, it's interesting. And, but from then on, something just changed. It was almost like the river had given me a blessing.
Mm.
And the two guide boaters that were with us, um, one was an old college professor, and he was real wise and very intelligent. And he went on and on and on about how Native Americans saw this as a blessing anytime eagles circle you. And he's like, I've never, he had done that part of the river for over 30 years. He'd never seen anything like it. Every now and then he'll see eagles, but usually they won't circle you, usually not a male female pair. And from then on, that's that day I started calling it Mama River.
Mm.
And from then on, as I would swim, I would just not hear things here, but hear them here. Little whispers of beautiful, comforting things that were said. And then that night I'd write them down in the journal. And that's what became the Mama River Whispers.
And it's
And
so
we
powerful.
thought we thought that rather than tell the story and make it too hippy dippy, the best way to add those in is just kind of put them in at the first of every chapter as kind of a nice little aside,
I
and
love
let people kind of figure it out if they want to.
Cry into me, let me silence your screams, let me flow with your fears. I was like, are you kidding me right now? There's nothing I love more than watching somebody go in for their first cold plunge and feel the freedom to express themselves while they're in there.
Right.
I love that, and that resonated so much with me. And the story of the Eagles really reminded me of a story that philosopher Viktor Schauberger had talked about the eagles and how he would study their relationship with the prey with fish in the lakes in Austria. And there was one time where he would watch and he'd say the eagles would come in, they'd start to circle, and then it would be an invitation for the fish to join them, and they would create this energetic vortex, and then the eagle would jump down and take the fish and obviously, into a whole other world. And then when Victor Schauberger changed the location on the mountain that he was doing the observing from, he noticed it was actually the fish that started this energetic dance and would start circling and call in the eagles.
Oh, wow.
It was almost like um, the fish is saying, I'm ready to move into a new life. I'm ready to explore and get out of this river that I've only known and move in. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, I love that. Like, because it felt a little bit similar to me. You started this energetic vortex and called in those eagles. And I don't know,
What a gift. I'd never heard that story or that thought. But it sure helps me to understand my story and what took place from that moment on, not only in my experience in the swim, but in my life. So, Tammy, thank you for that. What a gift.
you're welcome. Well, it was.
You think you know everything about your story, and then somebody comes along and adds a beautiful little piece, and you just did that. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hmm.
You probably don't have much more time, but I think I just have one more question,
Sure.
and I'm
And we can do a round two sometime if you
oh
want
man,
to.
I would so love that. There was
Yeah.
something on page 196. I just want to pull it up that you wrote. Um, oh, this was so cool when you talked about People have asked me since the swim, Dean, how did you get into the river day after day? And then you said, I longed for it. And I feel that so much for myself. Like the cold, like I say plungers know other plungers. Look across the room and see somebody and you go, oh, that person's a plunger.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you have that experience as well, or you
Hmm.
probably have called in a whole bunch of other people doing it with you, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
uh,
you can tell. And um, it's, I think it's really important. One of the things I learned from this is that it's not just water, it's all of nature. It's all of the elements. Since in the last 15 years, what I've tried to do, or actually 11, what I've tried to do is develop greater relationships. Of course, my first love and my probably most primary relationship is always going to be with water, but earth, fire, and air as well. And because
that too.
after
All the elements.
after my radical remission of leukemia, and for your listeners, the first blood test I took afterwards, it was gone. And the type of leukemia I had isn't supposed to ever go away. And my doctor, who is the number three researcher in the world, said he'd never seen it happen. And if he hadn't diagnosed me himself, he thought I'd been misdiagnosed. But he and I both thought with the leukemia gone, the lymphoma would just dry up and go away, but it did the exact opposite. It got very aggressive. And so he wanted me to do chemo and radiation, and I didn't want to. And I said, hey, doc, nature healed me once. I'm sure there's something in it that could help me to heal again. And so I started Googling, and that's when I found the research from Japan on forest bathing. And I started going and spending 24 hours in the forest every week, every Friday. And I started that May of 2015. And by March of 2016, my lymphoma was gone without chemo or radiation. And so it's just the universe or life set me up to understand firsthand fundamentally that we are just way too disconnected from nature. And that's, I believe, why we're also addicted, anxious, depressed, and sick, is because we take better care of our cell phones than we do ourselves. We live on this big battery. It's a whirling planet with a molten center that creates huge amounts of energy, and we are hardwired. We're even shaped like electrical plugs, but we don't ever plug ourselves into the planet. And then we wonder why we're on low charge and why we're not working efficiently or effectively. You know, everybody I know plugs in their cell phone every night because they want it to work effectively and efficiently the next day, but they never plug themselves in. And so over the last 10 years, especially, my first thing, and this is the centerpiece of this new form of psychology I'm developing, this new approach, I don't ask people about their symptoms. Usually they vomit them out, but I don't ask. I ask, how much are they going to source? How much are they plugging into the planet? Because if I can get them to do that, it's amazing how, and I'm sure you've seen it time and time again with your cold plunging, how the symptoms just dry up and go away within weeks, if not weeks, months, but usually within weeks.
Sometimes days.
Yeah.
Days.
And cold plunging for my panic disordered folks and for my high anxiety folks, it's the only thing I've ever seen work 100. And this is now with over 1,000 people in the last 11 years. If they'll do it, it works 100% of the time with 100% of the people. It's just what I call a neurological knee-jerk reaction. There's no way it can't work. And so it's really disappointing to me now that kind of an ambulance chasing podcaster who loves clickbait got a researcher that didn't do very good research and now says that cold plunging's bad for women.
I saw that.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw that.
It's such nonsense. I'm
Yeah.
good friends with Tom Seeger, the guy who is the founder of Morosco Forge, the first cold plunge company in the world. And he's just a brilliant man and a researcher. And he's written a fantastic, probably the best book on cold plunging ever. It's called Uncommon Cold. And oh man, he just eviscerated her. Yeah, with Ed and pointed research after study after research study, and he's had several women like you on talking about how it's helped them and all their friends. So I'm so glad you're just another good, strong voice that shows women that, and I hear it daily. Well, I've heard it's not good. Okay, you heard it from one place in a 30-second clip. Maybe you should fact check.
Yeah,
Maybe you should ask around. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I will tell you, I'm like I own a small contrast therapy studio, and I'm in a
Oh, do you?
small town
Okay.
in Alabama.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
came
wow.
to Toronto to do this because I believe in it so much, and people thought I was
Mhm.
crazy to like, how is that going to work down in South Alabama?
Yeah.
I thought our clientele would be mostly men, and it is a half and half, women and men. And I see
Good.
the women constantly talk about the benefits that they're achieving, and like you said, I know for myself, right? So
Right.
we're the
Perfect.
we're the proof. And okay, so I want to thank you um for
I
being
want to thank you. You gave me a real gift that I am just going to keep on this feedback loop. Yeah, please DM me this guy's name because
okay, well,
I've heard of him, but I haven't read any of his stuff. So now I really want to read it.
Viktor Schauberger.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'll DM you. And um I also want to say the next book come when your next book comes out, I would love to read that and reconnect.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah. You'll
And
probably see it. I'm going to blast social media with it. Actually, I've got three things. I've been busy. I've
okay,
got, I've written two books and created something I'm really excited about, if you don't mind me telling you.
tell me.
Um, for the last year and a half, actually two, I've been working really hard on and used all my nerdy clinical skills and developed an assessment that then's led into everything else. I wanted a test that people could take to help them know which of the four elements they're most akin to and how they would most easily start doing nature connection because we all do it differently. And one of the most common things I hear online is, well, Dean, that's good for you, but it wouldn't work for me. There's no way I could swim 187 miles or get in glacial streams. I'm like, okay, do it your way. But I got tired of saying that. So I thought if I made my own nature based personality type
Oh my
test.
God, I love this.
Yeah. And so I'm calling it the Wild Connection Score. I've used it with hundreds now, and the reliability and validity is pretty high. And so I think it's going to work for everybody. And then that led into people saying, well, Dean, people that were doing it, my test subjects said, well, that's great. And it taught me so much, but I'd like to know more about what you do. And my wife, I thought I'd never fall in love again, but 5.5 years, about a year and a half after the swim, I thought, I'm not dead yet. And Mary's gone, and I'm sad that she's gone, but I'd love a partner. And so I started dating. And then this beautiful fitness instructor, bikini competitor, and yoga instructor acted interested, and it made me curious as to what was wrong with her. But I found out she's the kindest person I've ever met and more beautiful on the inside. So we fell in love and got married. Her name's Bobby. But she said, Bobby said, you need to help people learn how to do what you do. Because if they do what you do, they'll get what you got. And so I didn't want to just write a self-help book. I wanted it to be more personal. So I kind of made it in journal form, and I
Mm.
call that the Wild Me Manual. But as I had beta readers or test readers read it, they wanted more, and they wanted more nervous system regulation strategies that are nature based. And so here in the last 8 months, I wrote a little reference book I'm calling Nervous System First Aid. And it's got over 50 little things that you can do and all sorts of indexes so that you don't just read it. You can read it all the way through, but it's mostly, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious. And here's why. Oh, look up in the glossary or the index, I could do this. And you go to it and you try that out. So it's experimental, and it'll just teach you how to use nature or quick strategies to regulate your nervous system.
Here's
And
why
then
I
it
love
also teaches the basic fundamentals of this new approach called bio-wild psychology. But then that led to, well, Dean, I don't like to read. I just want to connect with nature. And then a lot of my clients also were starting to complain that getting out in nature was a chore.
Mm.
And I'm like, how could it become a chore? Oh, they're not being spontaneous and they're not being very playful. And I'm kind of both just naturally. And so I started meditating and asking, how could I help people to be playful and spontaneous? Oh, everybody loves cards. And so if I develop a card deck where they just pick a card and it tells them what to do that day, it would put the spontaneity and kind of the playfulness back in it. And so I developed something I'm calling the Nature Code deck, and that's going to come out here in just a little bit. And it's 12 cards for each of the four elements. And it's got some thought provoking quotes and sayings, but then you turn it over, and each card has kind of a theme and a nature strategy, a challenge, but then it's in 3 degrees
Mm.
of uh, experience or difficulty. So you can pick easy or moderate or hard, depending on what your fitness level is or what you're feeling even that day. And the fun thing about it, it's been a little spooky because I really got into numerology and tried. That's why I picked 48 and 12 cards for each. And
Mm.
I mean, I really tried to make this something special, but life took over somehow. I almost every one of my beta readers, without exception, has said when they draw a card, it's exactly what they needed that day.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where a lot of my clients that I work with now, coaching around the world, they're like every time at the end of the session, they're like, "Dean, draw me a card," and they're like, "Oh," and it's kind of crazy. Almost always, I'll shuffle the deck, pick a card. It's what we've been talking about that day. It's just kind of cool. So those three things are coming out here just in the next month.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't
Yeah, I'm pretty
wait.
excited about it too.
My kids are getting those in their stocking for Christmas. For
Oh, wow. Nice.
1,000%, because I will tell I have one of my children has a lot of anxiety, and I know
Hmm.
in being her mom that when you have that level of anxiety, it's hard for you to know what to do.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
especially as a
right? Being able to have a list or a card that you can pull, you're now being led to, what will
in a
happen.
fun way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
fun way. I love it.
Hmm.
I'm excited for these new things.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. They did about 20 years ago, a couple of college students went around the US to the major cities and found people that were 100 years old or more that were still fairly cognizant and asked them just one question. If you had your life to live over again, what would you do differently? And they all said one of three things. I would love more, I would laugh more, or I would do more that lives on after me.
Mm.
And since I've healed, I've always kind of loved a lot. But since I've healed, I love everything pretty much. And I laugh a lot, and I've always pretty much laughed a lot. But Bobby the other day, it was about 2 years ago, she said, you're helping a lot of people, but you need to give this to the world. You need to do something that's going to live on after you. And that really resonated. And so that's when I started really getting to work and working late nights trying to develop these things so that if something happens to me, this knowledge, not that I'm so special, I feel like it's been given to me as a gift, and then I need to pass it on,
You
to
are
live on.
special. You are very special. And the reason I say that is because people like, I don't know if you know Michael Singer, who wrote the Surrender Experiment, or like Louise Hay, who did work with AIDS, patients back
Oh,
in the day.
I'm a big Louise Hay fan.
Right? And those folks in my world, they are people who have used themselves as an experiment to be of service so that we can all learn from them. And to me, you're in that category. You've used your life as a way to show all of us and be of service. And so if you can give us more, I'm here for it.
Well, it's about ready to come out.
Yay. Well, thank you, Dean, for being here today
Thank you,
for this
Tammy. This has been
conversation.
special. I've really enjoyed it. And if you didn't get everything you wanted, I'm happy to do it again if
Thank
you'd
you.
like to.
I would
All
love it.
right.
All right. Have a great
Okay. Thanks. You too. Take care. Bye bye.